You're coming out of a seasonal depressive episode, getting back to what you know as normal life, and a global pandemic hits. You're trying to figure out how can we live in a community when we're all so isolated. This is Sucker Punched. Today, I am welcoming Jessica Kantrowitz to the podcast, and I'm really excited to have you here with us.
Hi, I'm excited to be here.
So first, I'm curious to hear about how the development and spread of COVID-19 has affected you.
Yeah, there's several layers to that answer. The most basic one I would say is that it has affected me far less than a lot of people. I'm still able to do my nanny job. I work part-time as a nanny 3 days a week, and the family and I have just included each other in our little self-isolation pod. So that part of my life hasn't changed much, which is great because I still have that income. I still get the snuggles from the kids and get to see the inside of a different house and a different yard. And then my other jobs are working at home jobs anyway. So that hasn't changed much. And then on another level, with mental health issues, I actually had a not really rough, but a pretty rough winter. I think I definitely experienced seasonal affective disorder. And so my anxiety gets a little bit worse. The depression gets a little bit worse. It's just I have trouble leaving the house. Not for work. For work, I can get myself out the door, but for things that are on my own time, like going to do laundry or going grocery shopping or getting exercise, it feels like I'm pushing through a wall to get out of the house during the winter. So for me, when the pandemic started, that was right when that was ending. So I actually feel a lot better now than I did before. My mood is a lot better in general. But of course, it sort of continues the isolation that I was feeling over the winter because it was hard for me to get out during the winter, and now it's not safe for me to go out and socialize. So that's an aspect of it. My parents are in the higher risk category. They live up in New Hampshire where thankfully things aren't quite as bad as here in Boston. But my dad has a degenerative muscle illness. So he's very, besides his age, he's in a higher risk category, and my mom because of her age. So I've been really worried about them and struggling to process, the anxiety for them and helplessness to do much about the situation because I don't live close enough to really help them in any tangible way. So
sure. What has it felt like in your mind and your body? Maybe just generally, but have you noticed, are things similar or different to like when the anxiety and depression are really, really present?
Yeah, I think for me, it's kind of the opposite because when the anxiety and depression are bad, there's something internal preventing me from doing the things that I would want to do. But this is, my internal energy will actually say like, oh, let's go out for a walk or let's go, see friends or even just go to the store. But then there's an external stop and I have to think about the safety issues and, whether I will actually enjoy that activity in a mask.
Right. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Have you discovered, so you said like when depression and anxiety are more present, I don't ever say not present because does that really ever happen?
Right.
For those of us that live with it. but when it's less present or kind of just in the background, you have these internal, like, instinctual fears that want to hold you back from doing things. Have you noticed there are things that you are afraid of, or ways that your body has expressed fear with the pandemic?
Hmm. Yeah, I think my first instinct was to, again, talk about my parents, because I think that's where a lot of my anxiety has been focused. And,
Mm-hmm.
um, but I think the way that it has affected my body, one of the ways is through food and through,
Mm-hmm.
like, I think that was one of the first reactions to the pandemic was like, oh, do we need to, stock up food? Suddenly there's no toilet paper, you know?
Sure.
And I have some history with, I don't know if, I've never had a diagnosis of an eating disorder, but I'm pretty sure I have one or have had at different points in my life. And one of the ways that I manage that is by, stocking healthy food and not, I don't have a lot of extra, food in my
Mm-hmm.
pantry and my freezer and everything. So at first it was like, okay, I have to buy all this food, but then I can't eat it because I need it
Mm-hmm.
for if I get sick and can't leave the house for 2 weeks. So
Sure.
that was very disorienting. uh, and then, yeah, just trying to understand at the time of year that I would naturally be getting outside more and getting more exercise and going to the gym more. I can't do those things. And so, again, it's kind of that continuation from the winter of like, okay, we're stuck in this situation where food is dysregulated and exercise is dysregulated. So, have to learn to balance that and live in this new normal.
Sure. Are you seeing that there's a certain group of people that is impacted by the or community of people impacted by the virus differently? I know specifically you just released a book on living with depression,
Mm-hmm.
and I can only imagine that you're already thinking about those readers because you're releasing the book.
Yeah,
But there's also this external thing happening that can complicate depression to begin with.
right, definitely. Yeah, I think about that a lot. I can't speak specifically to going through a major depressive episode during the pandemic because I'm not right now. But I think about, people who are and who were already experiencing the isolation of depression that makes it so hard to reach out to the resources that you need. And yeah, just I think the anxiety and negative thoughts that go along with depression must be worsened by the general anxiety in the air. And when there's a tangible reason for the negative thoughts that you're having, like, oh, it's not safe to leave the house, or even a thought that crosses my mind a lot is, what if I make a mistake and I'm responsible for somebody's death? And I can imagine if the depression were bad, that would be a really disabling thought. So yeah, my
Mm,
my heart has been with my fellow sufferers of depression during this time.
yeah, sure. What are some of the realities for you of living in a global pandemic? You mentioned that your job doesn't really change, that how you approach food has had to take a little bit of extra thought.
Hmm.
What are some of the other realities for you in your life?
Yeah, well, I wrote my book about a major depressive episode that I had in my early 30s. And it took a couple of years to work through that, and then a couple of more years to figure out some other stuff in my life. And so I've always wanted to be a writer, but I'm 46. I just turned 46, and I'm just sort of getting started in that career now. And I had in December of 2019, I just had this like inspiration or idea, or I don't know, that I was like, I think I can finally stop living in survival mode and maybe make my plans less out of desperation and more out of what I really want out of life. And so I was really excited about it, and I drew up a whole like monthly plan for what I was going to do with my writing and books I was going to pitch and books I was going to write, and I was going to move, then get a pet, all these really big things.
Yeah.
And of course, as all of us have experienced this year, those plans have, to a large part, had to be set aside. So it's really just kind of in waiting mode, and it feels extra sad, I think, because I've been in waiting mode for 2 decades already. But
can you talk more about that? Just what
yeah,
that waiting is like?
well, besides the depression, which I've had, my doctor diagnosed it as dysthymic depression with major depressive episodes. So that means, like you said, there's not often long stretches of time where I don't experience a little bit of depression. That's dysthymic, like mild depression. But then throughout my life, there were also these really big times of major depression. So that's been going on. And I've also had really bad chronic migraines since I was a kid. So those two things have really, and on top of that, it's been really hard for me for some reason, for several reasons, maybe, to identify those as limiting factors in my life instead of just
I can
saying
understand that.
instead of saying, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just get an A this semester like I did last semester? Or why can't I do this job even though, I seem perfect for this job? Or, it took a lot of time and work for me to say, oh, it's because I feel awful today emotionally, and because my head is killing me and I'm nauseous from the migraine and dizzy and I can't think straight. And that's not laziness or, rebellion on my part. That's just the reality of life with chronic illness. So that's one reason. And then another is whether that was related to the chronic illness or not. I think I spent a lot of my life. I went to school for a Master of Divinity, and then it took me a long time to get through that, but I was trying out various ministries in the meantime, in evangelical contexts, and then got graduated finally and got a job in an evangelical organization. And that, looking back, those places were never a good fit for me. And they were causing a lot of cognitive dissonance and a lot of strain on my mental health and physical health. But I think because I didn't want to give up, because giving up would be failure, and I was trying so hard to struggle through these things in my life, I stuck with them for a really long time. So that's something else that I've recently owned and started living more into who I really think God has called me to be, which is more of a creator and a minister, but in a different sense, not within the confines of a certain organization. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, I'm just sitting here like, yep. Like I identify so much with all the things that you're saying. And so
Yeah.
you've gone on this journey of this journey. That's like so. Ugh. But
Bachelorette.
yeah, you know what I mean. Like
Right.
you've put in the work to really discover who God has made you to be,
Mm.
um, and figure out what that means in your life and in your work life and um just what you want to accomplish personally, and come to terms with the fact that you live with chronic migraines and depression, and
Mhm.
you make this plan and start really dreaming for your writing and your creative life, and then like boom, a global pandemic, you have to
Yeah.
just stay home and not do those things. And I
Right.
think sadness is such a great word for that.
Mm.
Do we often give ourselves permission to be sad?
Yeah. And I wouldn't want to glorify the pandemic at all, and I don't want to glorify depression at all. But I think, like you're saying, we don't often sit with sadness or sit with fear or other emotions, and that's part of why it took me so long to figure out who I was and what I wanted to do with my life, because I would always push through them. I would always try to say, well, what's wrong in my life that I need to fix? Do I need to break up with a boyfriend? That helped once. That actually helped end a major depressive episode once. Do I need to move? Do I need to do this? But in the time that I write about in my book, none of those things were really possible for various reasons. So I sort of had to look inside myself and stay with
Mm.
those with that depression and what it meant and what was exacerbating it. And I think, it's potentially similar for many of us with the pandemic, because we can't rush to, fix it in the ways that we're used to. We're just sort of stuck here with ourselves and have to pay attention to what's going on in our own hearts and minds.
Yeah, we can't use any illusions of control as a way to avoid
Right.
the real emotional things going on.
Yeah.
How do you think that we can care for one another during this time?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, I write about in my book, when my depression was really bad this last time. I felt, I said I was once, and someone corrected me, so I'll say I felt very needy. It wasn't the kind
Mm,
of depression where I would just disappear and not talk to anyone. It was the kind of sort of anxious depression where I was desperate for someone to do something to stop the pain. So I was
yeah.
often emailing my friends or calling my family, and just pouring out how hard everything was. And understandably, that was a lot for some of my friends and family to take. Which is fair, they have limited resources as well, and they would set boundaries, but the boundaries would feel devastating to me.
Hmm.
So what I what I learned as I worked through it was that I couldn't overly depend on one or two people, that I really needed to have a broader network of people, and I needed to know specifically what they could offer me when I needed help.
Mm,
So, someone might be overwhelmed by me emailing constantly or calling in the middle of the night, but they really care about me, and they would be happy to, run out and buy a bag of groceries for me. But someone else,
sure.
yeah, but someone else might be overwhelmed at the idea of going to the store to get groceries, but they stay up late anyway, so they wouldn't mind a phone call at 3 in the morning or a text. So I sort of have come to think of my friends as a team in that way. And as
Mm,
I think about the show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and how you have different
Yeah.
lifelines. So
Yes.
yeah, so my friend Gina is my phone a friend or my text a friend, and she's always up for, getting a text, and she'll, even if she doesn't respond, I'll know that she's praying for me. And then I have other friends that I can reach out to in different ways, or so I spread it around. So
Yeah.
that makes me feel more connected as well. So
Sure. And that takes a little bit of work too, right? Like some
yeah,
strategy to figure out where people's boundaries are
right,
um and fit. It's kind of like making a puzzle.
right, exactly. And then, I know I have to remember that I am lifelines or can be lifelines to other people. But one
Mhm.
way to help them with that is articulating my own abilities and my own boundaries, to say, here's something that I can do for you, but here's something that I can't. And then they know how to reach out in a way that,
Don't you think we could like achieve world peace if we all just had that conversation with everyone that we know?
yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
what?
literally, we're all just so hurt by each other all the time, but we're all doing our best,
Yeah, and we're so hesitant. We don't want to hurt people's feelings, so we don't want to set boundaries.
Right.
But if we set boundaries, like you said, you just painted this awesome picture of your friends are helping you in ways that they feel like they can truly help you.
Mm-hmm.
Um and you're not asking them to do things that they're uncomfortable with, but you have to have those conversations beforehand. You can't just kind of like shoot in the dark
Right.
and hope that they're not, you know, you can here's what I'm trying to say. I'm gonna be all the way around the bush before my brain gets there. Um when you ask a friend to help in a specific way, you can ask confidently that you are not asking them to do something that they're uncomfortable with.
Right.
You're not wondering, because I know when I haven't put those people put my team in place, I get afraid to ask for help at all because I don't know whether or not someone will set honest boundaries with me. But
Right.
if you have those conversations ahead of time when things are okay, then when you go into that depressive episode, you can really trust that your friends have already told you the truth about where their boundaries are.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Although, it's not a static thing. Like it can
Sure.
flex and change over time as well. If they're feeling better or worse, or you're feeling better or worse, and what you're able to do
Sure.
can change. But yeah,
Mhm.
it's amazing what honest conversation will do. And also being honest with yourself. I don't know if you're into the Enneagram, but
Oh, yes.
yeah. What number are you?
I'm a one wing 9. So
Oh,
for non Enneagram people, that means I have this very strong need to be responsible. But then I have this little side piece of like wanting to make peace and not have
mm,
any conflict.
yeah.
What are
That's
you?
interesting. I am a 4 with a 5 wing.
Mm-hmm.
So 4s are creative, independent. They don't like to be like anyone else, but they also often feel left out and lonely. So it's a paradox.
Mm-hmm.
So it took me a long time to be honest with the fact that with myself about the fact that I was really like dwelling on ways that my friends had hurt me, or ways that my friends weren't being there for me that I wished they would.
Mm,
And to let go of that and say, it could be hurt because ever since my friend Jill had her son, she hasn't wanted to talk on the phone much anymore. And that used to be a really helpful part of my life, to have regular phone conversations with Jill. But
sure.
but I know that she's doing her best and her circumstances have changed, and I know that she loves me. So
Mm-hmm.
I've tried to shift my thinking from what people aren't doing in my friendships to what they are offering, and to accept their love in the way that they're giving it to me.
Do you think that if we kind of flex those compassion and love and helping muscles, that it'll change the way that we all view our neighbors or our friends, the people around us, even when the pandemic is over?
Gosh, I hope so. I think I hear a lot of people talking about that right now. Deal Mayfield, her book just came out, talks a lot about that, about neighbor love and, the responsibility that we have to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Caitlin Curtis, I just read her book Native, has a lot of the same themes. I would hope so. I mean, a lot more is happening than the pandemic right now, right? There's riots as we speak going on in Minneapolis, and I think people
Yep.
are realizing things about our country that many of us knew, but many of us are new to those realities. So I really hope that this is an opportunity for us to understand each other better as part of a community and as neighbors, and not as, my needs are the most important and my wealth is the most important, and but to really see how my life and my decisions affect others around me.
Mm.
I try to
How
be hopeful about that and not
Yeah, it can be really
discouraged.
hard some days.
Yeah.
Yeah. How would you encourage resilience and endurance in people right now?
That's a good question. I've been thinking a lot about how the things that, besides therapy, besides medication, and seeing your doctor regularly, the things that are helpful for many people for in caring for themselves through depression are lifestyle things like, exercise can be one of them, or having a regular routine in the mornings and evenings, or meditation can be really good. And to the almost every single one of those is harder right now because of the
Mhm.
pandemic. It's harder to, the gyms are closed, and at least here in Boston the streets are a bit crowded, so it's harder even to get out for a walk, for exercise. It's harder to, get out and see friends. It's harder to concentrate, so it's harder to do things like meditation if you were doing that before. So, what I think is that, first of all, we have to stop feeling, ashamed of ourselves for not being able to do those things. Because I think with depression and with migraines, I ended up, and still can, besides the pain of the depression and the migraines, I would feel guilt because I wasn't doing the things that I felt I should be doing to take care of myself for the depression and migraines. And so letting go of that guilt and that shame was a really important
Mm.
part of my process of healing. So I imagine that a lot of people who have lost those lifestyle changes and coping mechanisms that help with mental illness are feeling bad about it as well, feeling guilty, or, and so number one, stop feeling stop feeling bad about that. And number two, do the best you can and look for ways that you can modify those things. Like, maybe you can't go for a jog every day like you had been doing, but you could still get outside and sit in your yard or sit on your porch for a few minutes and, feel the fresh air and the bird song. And maybe you can't meditate every morning like you were, but you could still, every now and then throughout the day, put down your phone and close your eyes and take a few deep breaths and just trust that that's enough. You're doing what you can, and that's enough.
Jessica Kantrowitz is a writer and theologian living in Boston, Massachusetts. She writes about theology, culture, social justice, and chronic illness, including her own struggles with depression and migraines. You can find her at her website, jessicakantrowitz.com, on Instagram at Jessica Faith Kantrowitz, or on Twitter at JF Kantrowitz. Check out her books. They're all linked in the show notes. And make sure you get to know her because she's pretty awesome. You can find me, Becky L. McCoy, on my website, beckylmccoy.com, or on any social media at Becky L. McCoy. Please leave a rating and review this podcast, and make sure to share it with everyone that you know. Really looking forward to next week as we start the new episodes and the new series of Sucker Punched. See you then.